to our virtual town hall to discuss distance learning with Professor Glynda Hull from UC Berkeley. I will now turn it over to Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Kahan, and I want to thank you for joining us today for this important discussion on how we can help our students adjust to going back to school with distance learning and how we can support their success this year in this very different environment. Starting a new school year during COVID-19 has been front of mind for many people, me included. As most of you know, I have 3 children who are distance learning right now. Recently, Governor Newsom and the California Department of Public Health released guidelines for reopening schools. But the major point that affected where we are today is that schools cannot reopen for in-person classes until they've been off the state watch list for at least 14 consecutive days. And right now, both counties I represent, Alameda and Contra Costa, are on the state's watch list. So that means for the time being, our students are convening for distance learning. Now, whether we get back to the classroom is in our hands. And I really want to remind all of you of that. We have driven down these numbers before. In the spring, we drove down numbers in an incredible way. But it means we need to practice what the Department of Public Health is telling us, which means we need to practice social distancing, wear those masks, and those masks are proving to be incredibly effective. I was told on Friday that if we wear masks 80% of the time and 80% of us are wearing them, they are as effective as a vaccine. So wear your mask, wash your hands, and follow all guidance from the counties. We can do this. We can drive those numbers back down and get our kids back to the classroom where I know all of us want them to be. And I also want to talk a little bit about what the legislature has done in preparation for this school year. We recently passed SB 98, a bill that aims to get the kids into the classroom when it's safe, but it also ensures that children are getting the same quality and quantity of education and instructional hours as when they were in person. We want that to be meaningful, and we want to make sure that they're getting the instruction that they deserve, whether they're in the classroom or at home. And so I was proud to support that because I think many of us saw that we could do better than we did in the spring. Also, I brought a bill forward that enabled us to get $25 million into the hands of schools to provide access to additional laptops, Wi-Fi, and make sure that all of our students across California have access to learning, despite the fact that they may have less resources. So we're working hard as a state to get everybody learning and to get them a quality education. But as a mother of 3 young children, I, like many of you, understand how stressful and uncertain this is for everybody involved, for our teachers, our districts, our parents, our students. And like many of you, it's so important to me. And it is one of the things that I've talked about since deciding that I wanted to represent all of you, is that I want our students to have a quality education. And I want them to have an education that will prepare them for the future they're going to face. So we are here today with Dr. Glynda Hull to talk about how we can help them succeed while attending virtually. So I am so excited that Dr. Hull is here to share her expertise on the issue. Dr. Hull is a professor in the Graduate School of Education at UC Berkeley. Her research interests cover a wide range of topics, from technology and education to literacy and work and community education, all of which she writes extensively on and has videos online. So you can watch more of Dr. Hull after this if you'd like. So thank you so much, Dr. Hull, for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you.
Of course. And so I want to remind everybody listening that you can be a part of this conversation. So I have a few questions I'm going to ask Dr. Hull. I know that as many of you know, I have questions firsthand. We've received a few questions in advance, but if you want to engage and ask questions during this conversation, please do so. You can do that using the Q&A function if you're joining us on Zoom, or you can email my office and we will see those and they will get to me at assemblymember.bauer, B-A-U-E-R, -Kahan, K-A-H-A-N, at assembly.ca.gov. So there's several ways to join us and ask your questions, and we hope you will. This is meant to be a conversation that addresses the needs of the community. So Dr. Hull, let's get into it. Can you tell us, what would your first piece of advice be to parents who are feeling nervous and apprehensive about the start of this remote school year?
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be with you all. And my first piece of advice would be not to transmit that apprehension to your kids. So I know that we're all apprehensive, and we legitimately so, about this new form of instruction. I've been teaching online for a number of years, so I know up close and personal the difficulties and the challenges involved. But I think it's really important, especially at the beginning of the school year, to help kids find the joy in going to school. You know, going back to school is traditionally a very exciting moment, and kids should have much anticipation about it, as well as some perhaps worries and excitement and nervousness. But I think it's really important now that we're all using this new mode to find ways to help kids feel the excitement of that we've had always with school, the opening of school. So I wanted to give one little example that I saw recently, actually on Facebook, from a friend who has children in Contra Costa district. And their children were 4 years old, and the little boy will be attending transitional preschool, and his sister is 3 who will be doing online at home. So to prepare Boyd for transitional preschool, his parents helped him create a wonderful blackboard about 2x4, writing his name across the top, Boyd, saying where he's going to online transitional preschool. Asking him, what do you want to be? And Boyd happens to want to be what he called a bug scientist. Asking him what his favorite food is and to name a book. And all of this was something that he was helped to either to write himself, or it was transcribed for him. It was colorful. And then the parents took a picture of Boyd holding his blackboard in front of him. And that's wonderful in just a number of ways. And one thing it does is it gives kids something to talk from, to hold up, to have the picture, to show who they are, to connect to their backgrounds, to begin to build friendships with kids who also want to be scientists, for example. It helps them begin already to build on what they already know and to make connections between their home lives and their school lives. And this is a traditional kind of activity that could be done in person, of course, but you can also do it online. You can also imagine the equivalent of that kind of show and tell in an online format. And I would just urge parents to think about ways to help kids be excited about school and not so worried about online school.
I love that. My kids, sometimes they're the best teachers I have. And they said to me, Mom, every year we get our pizza party and ice cream on the first day of school. It's the first day of school. And they really wanted us to treat it the same way we do every year. And so we did. And it really, I think, helped them feel, even though it's very different, just a little bit of normal and a little bit of a celebration. So I love that. So let's talk about setups, right? So I have 3 that are all learning at home. What does a successful learning environment look like at home for those of us that have multiple children or one child? You know, what should we really be focused on?
The standard advice about setting up at home for online schooling is to provide a workspace that's devoid of distractions, that gives some privacy, that allows kids to focus without paying attention to things in the environment. But we all know that's really difficult to do. Sometimes it's not possible for everyone to work at the kitchen table, and sometimes houses are crowded, and there just are not enough private spaces. So I read recently a really interesting idea that I think might be helpful to some families. And that is, instead of thinking about one workstation, one private workstation or workspace where a child or several children rotate through, think about a portable workstation or a portable place to engage online, especially asynchronously too. So you could do that in several ways. You could, of course, rely on backpacks that all kids have, but you could also have a kind of caddy, a shower caddy, which you assemble kids' materials, and not just their digital stuff, but their pencils and pads and paper and so on, so that they can carry it from one place to another at home, which I love the idea of kids having some agency about where they do their work. So they can choose to work in this corner or that room, or perhaps outside if that's possible. And there can be some variety throughout the day. It's also possible to create simply some little partitions using a room divider or a cardboard box that kids decorate that allow them to have a very personal spot in which to go and study. So those are a couple of ideas, although I do want to acknowledge the challenge of multiple kids in small spaces. It's difficult.
Yeah, but it's funny because in the spring, we initially set our kids all up in one space to make it easier for us. And then they would do exactly what you were describing. They would take their stuff and they would go find a spot to have a little bit more quiet. So little brother wasn't distracting them and the like. So to your point, they had right? They created their own agency and went and found the spot that worked for them. So, and then we modeled this year after sort of what we saw them choosing in the spring, and we'll see what happens.
Very, very good. And I know we've all learned a lot in the spring, and teachers have learned a lot this summer, teaching summer school and summer camps. And I do think that we're all, at the university as well, we're all much better prepared to take kids and older kids into this learning experience virtually this fall.
Yes. And that has been, part you said, don't share your apprehension. And part of it is sort of getting to a place myself where I'm like, yeah, so it could have been better in the spring, but I'm confident that in the last few months, our educators and, everybody involved has worked incredibly hard, and it's going to be better and have a positive attitude. And I have to say, we started last Thursday, and that has been my experience so far. Just the amount of work that went into getting them ready and to making it look, much more structured in a way that I think will make my kids thrive. So positive attitude, I think, is important. And thank you to our educators who clearly have put an immense amount of thought and work into what this will look like, even though it is far from ideal, we know. So let's talk about getting our children organized. So in the past, I know especially my fourth grader last year, his teacher was the one who, he would have his organizer and she would help him get organized with what he needed to accomplish. And now that role is more on those of us that are helping our kids at home. So can you talk about sort of some tips and tricks for helping us keep our kids organized?
Yeah, well, I think that daily schedules and weekly schedules are great. So planning out the week with a rough sense of what will happen when, I think is very, very important. And it's important for little kids, but it's important for older kids too. It's even important for university students. I mentioned that I've been teaching online for a while. And at first I thought, it's going to be like teaching, simply assigning readings and then students go off and do them. But no, it's not like that when you're teaching online. You need to provide a predictable structure throughout the week about when readings are due, when assignments should be turned in, and so on. And I think that structure helps a lot just in keeping kids organized with the amount of work they have to do. They have several subjects, many of them, to study, and a lot of it's hard to keep track of. So many teachers are already putting together assignments and expectations and with links to documents and so on. And if your teachers are doing that, I would become very familiar with them and the expectations of when things are due, et cetera. But even apart from that, having an agreement with your kiddo about what happens when during the day. So the evening before, you're going to be talking about what the next day is going to bring and giving a preview of the week, and then roughly following that schedule pretty regularly. I think it helps provide this predictability and routine that takes away anxiety about what has to be done.
That's great. And I know it'll be interesting to see as the weeks go by, right? One of the things I found last week was, online, obviously, especially for my older two, they're really focused on the curriculum they're supposed to learn, as they should be, but didn't include a lot of movement and exercise as they would in school, where they're out running at recess and have PE. And so we are talking about how do we also add to the schedule to keep my kids moving, because it's definitely good for them and it helps them sleep. So that's a good idea, to have more of a robust schedule to incorporate those things as well. So distractions. I'm not the only parent whose kids get distracted by as we do, to be frank, right? When we're working from home, all of a sudden you can do the laundry, and there's so many things that you can do alongside your work, which when you're in the workplace isn't true. So how do we deal with these distractions, be it digital or pets or other siblings? What's your advice on that?
I sort of want to flip the question a little bit and ask it in a different way, and ask, how do you keep kids focused? How do you stay focused? So we can try to keep the dog out of the living room and keep the kids in separate spaces. But I think it's also important to build the capacity to focus and to teach kids how to be organized in their work and how to keep their minds on what they're doing. So I confess that I think the very best way to keep kids focused and not distracted is to have them engaged in tasks that truly capture their imagination. Now, that is the best way. So we all have had the experience of seeing students in the classrooms and seeing our own children deeply immersed in an activity. Maybe it's a video game, or maybe it's a book, but they're lost in that world, and there's no trouble keeping their minds on what they're doing when they're really engaged. So I'd go back to first principles in thinking about focus and distraction, and I'd ask, gee, how can I reimagine this activity so that it truly engages my little one? How can it be transformed? Or how can I imagine a different kind of activity that would satisfy the same goal, that would really engage kids? But I would also, in a larger sense, really think about the big activities that organize kids in the sense of connecting their minds to ideas and projects that they want to accomplish and doing things in the world, because that's the kind of engagement that will make distraction disappear to a larger extent. But that's that's a big goal to have, that deep engagement that we all want for our kids. And there are many tasks that kids will have to engage in for school that they just have to do, and it's not so much a matter of being engaged. So I do simple things like help kids realize that there will be a reward at the end of things. So let's work now for 15 minutes on this, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to do jumping jacks, and you're going to get to see mom do jumping jacks. In fact, I'm going to do jumping jacks with you. So I would set timers, and so to let kids know that once they accomplish something, there is going to be some enjoyable activities or more enjoyable activities that follow. And I would do, I'd engage in a lot of praising behavior. A lot of times, especially with distractions, we say, don't do this, you got to pay attention and so on. But I'd kind of try to flip that too. And I would praise kids for what they did. Maybe they were able to listen to a teacher's presentation for 5 minutes longer today than they were able the day before. So I would say that. I would point out the way in which they got through more of their math problems in one sitting. I'd find every opportunity I could to praise the behavior that's focused. And I'd kind of, as much as possible, ignore the behavior that's not focused, within reason, of course.
No, I think that's such good. I love the idea of, how do we engage our kids in things that just keep them focused, right? There's a reason why they want to do the other things. It's engaging and wonderful. And there's so much at school that is as well. I actually walked in on my daughter the other day, who very much likes for me not to come in. I came in to check on her, and they were doing this amazing math game where they had to, figure out the math answer and then figure out which candy they'd want because one was going to have more than other. And she was really engaged because her teacher had made it so fun and rewarding for her. So I think that's a great point. So this morning I asked my son how his morning meeting went, and I got, Mom, why are you asking me that? Right. I think many of us are probably getting that from our children. So, what is the level of involvement that you think is right, especially for our kids for whom maybe they feel like it's overbearing? I'm going to ask a second question about parents who can't be as involved after this, but for those that are trying to be involved, where is that line?
Well, I think that line is drawn differently with different kids. And some kids will tolerate more involvement than others. And some want to do their own thing, and they want you to respect their privacy and not drop in on their online classroom, that sort of thing. So my advice would be to figure out what individual kids need in that regard, and then try to hold myself to kind of respecting a kid's desires when that's possible. Some kids are much more independent in terms of getting their work done, and some like the assistance. Some kids thrive on interaction and talking. We were speaking before about distraction. What for some kids is distraction is for others just nice background noise. Listening to music helps them do their homework. So figuring out, as I'm sure you parents already have, what their own child's comfort level is in terms of involvement, I think it's really important. Of course, if you see your kid falling between the cracks, if you see them needing extra help, you're going to want to find a way to step in to address that. So I think it's achieving this balance between not being overbearing and infringing on, especially as kids get older, infringing on what they see as their privacy. And of course, you don't want to embarrass them in front of their friends, none of that. So you want to manage this balance between that and being attentive to a child who may not be flourishing. Not every kid flourishes online. Not every kid flourishes, as we know, in a face-to-face classroom either. And the moment you know your kid is going down that road, then you have to put on your problem-solving outfit and figure out, what the problem is. Why aren't they flourishing? And how can we address this? And there are ways to address things online as well. So,
yeah, and partner with their school, right? I mean, they are a resource
absolutely.
to students when they're not flourishing. And so
Absolutely.
communication is so key. I know, as both someone who works with schools regularly and a parent, that's really important. So now let's talk about, I just spoke a little bit about the work we have done at the state level to make sure we're getting devices into the hands of those students who don't otherwise have them. We know that not all, and you spoke about space and how some people have more space than other space. And that is also true of parent involvement as well. We know that there are a lot of families for whom the parents are both working full-time essential jobs outside of the home. And those students don't have there's not the ability to provide the same level of involvement for parents. Do you have advice for families where, they're concerned about the fact that they're handing their kid over to a Zoom and then praying for the best? Because that's what their situation necessitates.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point, a really difficult question, and it just lays bare the kinds of inequities that I know trouble us all in terms of access to technology, but also access to social supports and caring adults and someone to turn to during the day. I think that schools are doing a great job now in providing that kind of additional support that kids may need, so that kids aren't just turned over to a Zoom session or given a packet to work through during the day. So let me give one example of how a program that I've been working with has tried to address this, at least in a small way, but it may be an example that would work for others. So I teach an undergraduate course in education at UC Berkeley. And as part of that course, my students, some of whom want to be educators, some of whom are just interested in education and in improving schools and getting to know young people, these students work in schools. That is, when we are in a non-COVID era, they go to schools and assist teachers. In a COVID era, they do this work online. And it's really wonderful to see the kind of assistance that they can provide as young people at Cal, both role models, but also kids who know a lot of things about science and math and all kinds of subject matters and can be tutors and mentors. So I'd love it if our schools would make better use of our universities and our colleges in the Bay Area. We have wonderful ones, and we have many college students who desire to help. And a helping hand in this situation can make all the difference. So you might have a couple of kids who need some work on division, let's say. And so you have a tutor who has an hour to spend in a Zoom room helping kids catch up on math, yeah? Or you have an opportunity to talk with Cal kids about going to college and what that's like. So I think that there are all kinds of resources that are untapped in our communities that would give teachers a helping hand and give parents a helping hand who don't have the access to the same kinds of resources and who aren't able to stay at home all day and tend to online learning. So I'd love to see a national movement in this regard, where we link universities and colleges more tightly with our local schools to provide all kinds of supports.
I just, a constituent reached out the other day because she was thinking about this exact issue and wants to start sort of a program similar to what you're talking about, but also incorporate in a lot of some of the parents in our community who are fortunate enough to be able to stay home with their children, but have been teachers or have some sort of expertise, right? So I think there's resources out there at our universities, which we're so blessed to have, but right in our community. And the more we can do to bring it all together, I think the more we can support California students. And, you know, we're all used to a world where we set up our lives knowing our kids would be at school all day and well taken care of and educated, and that has shifted on its head, and we need to provide the supports for those that need it. And I think that's so critical. So if you're listening and you need more support, please reach out to your schools, reach out to us. We can connect you with the right people if it's not us, but there are supports out there, and we want to be a part of it. So our educators, you've already talked a lot about how our educators can help, make this engaging and provide a schedule and do other things that will really support our students through this. But what advice do you have for them? Is there anything else you'd want to mention? How they can succeed?
I have so much respect for our teachers, and they're doing just an admirable job in really difficult times. Teaching online is different from teaching in person, and people have had to acquire just a whole different skill set. So I would urge teachers to cut themselves some slack in the sense of not being quite the perfectionists that they always are. Mistakes will be made. Technology is going to go haywire. There are going to be problems that you just could not anticipate. So tomorrow's another day, and kids are wonderfully forgiving. And I think it's really important for teachers to guard their own emotional health as well, and to do what they can to distress. It's very difficult to teach online all day long, and to prepare to do that, which requires different kinds of skills. When I'm teaching an online course at Cal, the other courses I'm teaching are generally in person, and that makes it very doable. But dealing with screen time is taxing, and I hope that teachers will watch out for their own health. I think there are also things that parents and all community members can do to support teachers, and that is cutting them some slack and not expecting everything to be exactly perfect, of course. And I know it goes without saying, we need to pay our teachers more. We need to really support them as the professionals that they are. And as we spoke before, we need to, more now than ever before, rely on our communities in order to provide resources for teachers. We live right next door to the Silicon Valley. We have all of this tech expertise. And it breaks my heart when teachers are struggling to make technology work, when there's no reason for it, when there's such expertise that could be drawn on. So I'd love to see our tech companies step up as well to support our teachers, not to provide the technology that kids need, but also to provide the kind of training that teachers need in order to be very comfortable online.
Yeah, I love that. You already answered my next question, which is what parents do, but I think it's so important that we support our teachers as well. And I have to say, one of my kids' teachers wrote over the weekend to just let us know her kids were starting today. And I was so grateful she did that, right? Because I think it enables us to support her through her own transition, and trust me, we know what that means, right? So, I did a social media post reminding everyone to thank their teachers, but it is so critical. This isn't easy for them. And, we do need to, they're doing so much, and we need to support them as much as possible. And yeah, sometimes that's helping them understand how Zoom works, right?
Yes.
My husband has run virtual teams for years and years and years. And so before this pandemic, was a Zoom expert. And so I've sort of inserted him in to provide guidance where needed, because he's so good at it. Because I know I struggle with it often.
Yeah.
How many times have I been told you're on mute? So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about kids and families that have IEPs, that have special needs during this remote learning. As challenging as distance learning is for all of us, I know it's especially difficult for those that need an extra set of services that are pretty hard to provide sometimes via Zoom and, you know, the tech solutions that we have. What advice do you have for those families?
Well, first of all, I would say take full advantage of the online affordances, which have improved greatly in recent years in terms of assistive technologies. So we now have pretty good read aloud technologies, and we have very good speech to text technologies that can make it easier for kids who may be struggling with reading or with writing to get assistance directly online. It's hard to keep up with all of the features that are becoming available to assist everyone online. To give an example, I recently began to use closed captions with PowerPoints, with Google Slides. So if you're presenting via Google Slides in a classroom or in a business setting, you can enable closed captioning, and your voice will be transcribed at the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen. And you can also get a transcript of that session, which is really important for parents sometimes who want to know, well, how is this explained in class? And sometimes it's really easier to read a transcript than it is to listen to a video. So first and foremost, I would say, make yourself really knowledgeable as you can about the great assistive technologies that are a part of the educational landscape now, but that are being supplemented all the time digitally. It's exciting times that way. But I would also say that it's not just the technology, of course, that we want to make appropriate and assistive. There's an approach toward learning that's been around for a long time called the universal design for learning. And simply put, it just means giving the greatest range of students access to engagement and learning. So how do we design learning so that all kids can be engaged? So one of the ways that this is done is to provide multiple ways for kids to show what they've learned. So in schooling, not so much now, but for a long time, we've had particular notions of tests as the only legitimate way of showing what you've learned. But there are other ways too. You can create a video instead of writing an essay. You can leave a voice message instead of writing a text. So multiple kinds of ways to demonstrate what you've learned, I think, is important for all kids, as well as kids with IEPs, and multiple ways to have an entry point into learning. So there's just more than one way to kind of skin a cat whenever you're teaching anything. And asking a question sometimes is the way to get us kids started. Providing written instructions is the way to go with other kids. So figuring out the particular kinds of representational systems that work best with your child, providing multiple ways of showing what you know. Also providing always the kind of scaffolding that makes it possible for kids to do what they can't do on their own with a little assistance. So it's a nice way, I think, to think about learning in general, but it's a great way to think about learning for kids with special needs. And that is, we all can do some things on our own, and that's pretty much what we've already learned. And there are other things that are outside what we're able to do, no matter if we even have help. So what you want to hit is that sweet spot where kids can do something with the assistance of others. It could be the assistance of a teacher, it could be the assistance of a peer, it could be the assistance of a technology program. But it's that space where kids can perform beyond what they're able to do on their own. There's even a technical term for it. It's called the zone of proximal development. And that's the sweet spot of learning that you're aiming for all kids. But you're especially wanting to find the space where, given a little bit of assistance, given a slight nudge, given a hint, given a strategy, kids can take a leap and can learn. That's where the learning occurs.
Thank you for that. And I think it's an interesting point. I have a sibling who has special learning needs, and when in college had access to tapes of courses that had never been available before. It was a game changer, being able to watch it again and catch the things that weren't caught the first time. And so sometimes access to these technologies can be a game changer for some students who, and there wasn't knowledge before that that was really going to be the strategy that worked. So hopefully this provides some strategies for some students that weren't available before, and maybe it'll be something we can carry forward. And I do know, one thing I do want to highlight, because it is something we've heard a lot from constituents, is for students in our districts that, have aides full-time when they're in the classroom, or even part-time, or have physical needs that require sort of in person. We are working with some of the local groups that advocate to try to see if we can get guidance and work with our districts to provide sort of some more hands-on learning. It's not clear right now if that's safe or available, but we are partnering to see what is available from the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. So it is something we are paying attention to, because we know every student's needs are different, and that usually we're able to meet those needs, and we need to work to find a way to do it even in these differing circumstances. Let's talk about social emotional development. I think it's so critical, especially for our little ones. I have a first grader, and so much of what we want them to learn in those early grades is how to engage with their peers and share and negotiate in a group. And that goes all through, actually. I mean, I shouldn't, it's the things they learn from a social emotional perspective are different as kids age, but it's such a critical part of being in the classroom and being at school and navigating those social environments. And that feels missing right now. So how can we help our students get that?
It's such an important question, and I don't think it has to be. It may be a little different, but I don't think it has to be missing. And in fact, it shouldn't be missing. So let me tell you a little story about a summer program I was involved with this past summer. We did a summer camp for elementary aged kids, and to begin with, our teachers and our program leaders, they were so new to Zoom, and we began watching the recordings of their sessions with the little kids. And there was 98% teacher talk and 2% kid talk on those Zoom recordings. It was very hard for adults to kind of move out of the way a little bit, or to figure out ways to kind of get kids to talk and to take the lead in conversations. And as soon as we saw that, we thought, well, we have to figure out how to change that. Because talking to each other, social interaction, speaking, explaining, it's important both cognitively and socially. So you want kids to learn how to engage with each other. You also want them to be able to articulate ideas, to say things, to speculate, to try on big words. So there has to be talk. Talk is so hugely important in online classrooms. It cannot be a silent space. It just cannot be. So how do you make that happen? We learned by accident a little technique that seemed to work very well. It was so curious to us. We were worried in our summer camp that kids wouldn't even come. It was a voluntary summer camp. We thought they won't want to be online, but they did come. And in fact, they came early. They started logging in before our program was even open. And so we started being present for them to get on Zoom before the program opened. And the reason they wanted to be online was to just have some social chat, to connect with each other. So we started what we called a breakfast club. And it was entirely voluntary. We started 30 minutes before school each day. And kids would drop in at moments when, at odd moments, sometimes on time, sometimes not. Sometimes they sat and listened to the background music we had playing. Sometimes they asked questions. Sometimes they chatted with each other. But it was this little social moment where kids could connect with each other, and where adults could connect with the kids too, where the teachers could connect with the kids in an informal setting. I think that was hugely important. So providing, first of all, making sure there's enough kid talk in our online interactions, and and kid talk or kid participation. So it's not always just answering a question in a large group. Sometimes it can be answering a question in a chat. Yeah. And sometimes it can be participating in a breakout room with 2 or 3 kids instead of the whole group, where shyer kids might feel better able to talk and articulate their ideas. So that's important. Having informal time just to connect is really hugely important, and you can do that online. I also want to mention, in terms of being just aware of kids' emotional health, we have to figure out new ways for kids to interact, and we have to be respectful, I think, of kids' desires and their feelings. So this summer, we noticed that our kids did not want to show their faces on the screen. Some of them just did not want to. They wanted to have the little black box with their name, but they didn't want to have a picture of themselves, and they didn't want to be live on screen. And at first it really worried us. We thought, how can we tell if the kids are engaging and so on? But we eventually decided that that would be a choice that the kids would make. And I know that's not the choice that you'll want in every educational situation, but sometimes kids have good reasons for not wanting to appear on screen. And it's really great to respect that, and also to keep track of it over time. One of the things we noticed was that over the summer, kids began showing their faces more on the screen. They began revealing more about themselves and feeling more comfortable talking online. So just be aware that and it's true, it's true even with college students. My college students, my Cal students tell me that, they say, Professor Hull, it's really hard to raise your hand virtually in a 200-person lecture. I'd much rather put my question in the chat box. And you have to respect that, and again, provide multiple avenues for participation, and being mindful that of the new stresses that the online world introduces, as well as the affordances.
Yeah, I know as an adult, sometimes I don't want my camera on. It's hot today. So I guess we need to understand our children to feel that way. A follow-up, I'm going to go to some questions we received from the listeners. And the first one follows up on what we're talking about, which is, keeping our kids active. So this this attendee has a 13-year-old and asks, how do I keep my 13-year-old who needs to be forced to step outside for exercise, to be active and to engage socially? Any thoughts on that?
So maybe your 13-year-old would be willing to be involved online in physical activity. So maybe there's a way in which she and her friends could have a dance class, or they could make, if you allow it, TikTok movies of exercises. So I would probably try to work with her in terms of combining her interest in staying inside with getting her involved in physical activities that have social value, such as dance. And this summer with our little kids, we taught yoga, and we had all kinds of physical activities. It's really important not to stay connected, even especially for older kids who may have more of a propensity to stay online on social media, etc. It's really important to have some exercise. And if it's not outside, maybe it can be inside, done in a group with your friends online.
Yeah. And I think it's funny that relates so perfectly for a 13-year-old. I know for my little one, that we would do ninja moves with his little friends, because for them, engaging on a Zoom with each other is actually really hard. They're not people who sit down and have conversations. And that was one way. And it got them moving. So I think that can apply to kids of various ages. It just looks a little different.
And kids don't have to sit still. We got in the habit of expecting kids to sit still in school, but it's an old idea. And they certainly don't have to sit still at home in front of Zoom. They can be moving around. They can be doing jumping jacks. They can be doing all kinds of things. And in fact, we were talking earlier about organizing a learning space, maybe you want to make the learning space so that kids can stand up, part of the time in order to work on the computer. But providing this variety, providing a kind of physical freedom along with intellectual agency, it's really good.
It's one of our teachers actually said we had to move all the furniture around their workspace so they could move. And now I see why. The other day they were doing somersaults every 10 minutes. Their bodies.
Excellent.
So another question is about kids that refuse to attend these Zoom or online classes. One attendee says, our 9-year-old adamantly refused to attend her Zoom classes or any pre-recorded classes in the spring. And again, I'm going to say, let's be optimistic about the fall, but nothing, reward or punishment, could get her to participate. Any advice for those students who just don't want to do this?
Well, first of all, I'd really try to get to the bottom of why. So any kind of solution needs to begin with an analysis of the why. And so I'd figure out with this 9-year-old, however you can, what's aversive to her. So something is not clicking, and it sounds as if it's a little more serious than just being bored or not engaged. It sounds like something's afoot there that you'll want to get to the bottom of and then solve that problem. So it would be different if, you know, if for example, the activities that were just boring, you know, that's different from the situation we were talking about before with children who were reluctant to show their faces online. So those are different kinds of problems. So it's hard to say exactly what the solution will be, but I would recommend trying your best to understand the source of the problem and then, addressing it that way. And I also want to put in a plug for the enormous amount of materials there are available online, and the support groups for teachers and parents online as well. You can get really great ideas from other parents who may be facing the same dilemma with kids who are simply refusing to participate.
Okay, that's good advice. Now this next question, someone who also has a 6-year-old boy, James, I have a 6-year-old boy as well. And he's asking about Zoom fatigue or otherwise just fidgeting the computer. And for those of us that have now watched these first grade Zooms where every kid is, way and moving this way, how do we get those little ones to, especially little ones, although I know with older ones it's hard, to not get fatigue and to stay focused so they can learn what they need to learn in front of it? And James did say that they do try to get outside and run around a bit, and that's not helping. So any other advice?
I would say I would take very frequent breaks, stretch breaks, and I would have a list of the types of breaks that you can take. A stretch break and a snack break and a pet break, and I'd probably make a contest of it and let your kiddo or the others in the class choose what kind of break you're going to have. I think it's too much to ask kids to engage and to sit still for lengthy periods of time online. So I would break it up, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing to do. Mix it with physical activity, but even just standing up, even just turning off your screen for a while, having a snack, those kinds of things will alleviate the Zoom fatigue that we're all feeling. I'm amazed sometimes with my colleagues, I get Zoom fatigue. We'll have these long meetings of an hour and a half and it goes on and on. I can hardly sit still. I can only imagine what a 6-year-old feels like who's being asked to sit still that long. So I just wouldn't do it. Now I would intersperse breaks and I would reward them. I would gamify it. That children compete, as I said before, in terms of what kinds of breaks. I would mix it up so that kids are looking forward to different kinds of activities as a part of a Zoom session, not just one kind of activity. I mean, another kind of thing that I hope will be a part of these Zoom sessions is a whole range of sets of activities. It's not going to work usually to just have a discussion. You're going to need to put kids in small groups. You're going to need to switch to the whiteboard. We haven't talked, I don't think, about the power of having kids work collaboratively. Not only does it teach social skills, but kids learn more when they're working together. It's often the case, especially in online environments, when they can do things together. So a whole range of different participant structures, I think will really go a long way toward making Zoom fatigue go away, even for the little ones.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And it's interesting because the one complaint I got from my 6-year-old last week was that he was raising his hand a lot and he wasn't getting called on enough. And there's 20 of them in this Zoom. So of course his teacher was just calling on each of them in turn, but that's a lot of kids, right? And, but I think it goes back to what you were saying about the opportunity to speak and express himself, and how do we find ways for that to happen? Let them do that, let them move, let them, you know, sort of change up the way. And I think that I'm reminding myself that we're only on day 3 and we're just getting used to it. And I know that the teachers are learning so much and working so hard, and that it will only improve as the weeks come. And for our kids too, right? Their stamina will grow. I know even last year when we were in person, the first time I'd heard this, it was from my daughter's 2nd grade teacher about how they had a certain reading stamina after the summer, right? And they had to start less. And then as the year went on, she could expect more reading time from them because their stamina would grow. And I was thinking about that recently. I think the same is true now, right? They've been on break. They haven't been doing these things, and their stamina will grow. But it's hard with some of these little kids to keep them focused. But I know that we're going to adapt and do as well as they can. So I just want to thank you for coming and for all of this incredible advice that you've been able to provide to us. It's not easy, but I know that you've given us some amazing things to go try to incorporate. And I know for educators as well, who are paying attention and watching and working so hard, that a lot of tips that will hopefully improve the experience for all of our students. But I want to thank those educators. I want to thank the people who are running our schools, our school boards, our teachers, the school staff that have worked so hard to get everything ready for the school year, because it's not easy, and it will not be easy as this pandemic continues to be in our community. But, you know, every little thing is not going unnoticed. We are seeing all the work that has gone into it, and it is incredible. And we will get through this, and our kids will learn this year. And again, you know, we've worked at the state level to ensure that we're setting good standards. And I know our educators are working hard to meet them and to provide the variety and quality of education that our students deserve. So again, you know, I will close by reminding everybody here that we have the power to get our kids back in the classroom. And I never hesitate to mention that, because when we wear masks and we socially distance, when we follow those guidelines to wash hands, we drive those numbers down. And as soon as those numbers get down, we can get our kids back into the classroom, which I know is where all of us want them to be, especially the parents on the line. So please join us in that effort. It's really critical. And it not only is best for the community, for the health of our community, for the safety of our community, but also for the topic that we have today. So thank you for being partners in driving those numbers down, because I know we're all working hard together to do that. So thank you again, Dr. Hull. You've been incredible, and I'm excited to go around and put some of these things to practice myself, and I'm sure others are as well. But please, for everybody listening, this isn't the end of the conversation. We're here to support you, as are, you know, your school districts and others. So reach out if you need assistance. Our number is 925-328-1515, or you can write us via email at assemblymember.bauer-kahan@assembly.ca.gov. So thank you for being our partners in educating our youth and making sure they have the future that they deserve.